December 2nd, 1993, Los Olivos neighborhood, Medellín. A man scrambles across a terracotta roof 3 stories above the street. He is 44 years old, one day past his birthday. Behind him, his bodyguard fires automatic weapons at the soldiers below. The man is barefoot. He wears jeans and a faded shirt. In his hand, he clutches a pistol. Below, in the narrow streets, the Search Bloc has surrounded the block. They have been hunting this man for 16 months. 700 police officers have died in that pursuit. Thousands of civilians have died in the explosions he ordered. The helicopters circle overhead. The rotors beat the air. The man knows what waits for him if he is captured alive. Extradition to the United States, a cell in Marion or Florence. He has said many times that he would rather die in Colombia than live one day in an American prison. He runs toward the edge of the roof. His feet slip on the tiles. Gunfire erupts from multiple directions. A bullet strikes him in the torso. Another hits his leg. He stumbles. A third bullet enters behind his right ear and exits through his forehead. The man collapses across the clay tiles. Blood pools beneath him. His eyes are open. The soldiers approach cautiously. They do not yet believe he is dead. Radio chatter confirms the identification. The war is over. The most wanted man in the world has been killed. His name is Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria. He controlled 80% of the cocaine entering the United States. He was worth somewhere between $2 and $30 billion. He built houses for the poor. He bombed commercial aircraft. He was elected to Congress. He declared war on the Colombian state. He killed thousands. He loved his children. He died on a rooftop in the city where he was born. The question is not how he died. The question is how someone like him could ever have existed at all. Before we continue, I want to ask you something. If you're finding this story compelling, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support genuinely means everything to me. And I'm curious, where in the world are you watching from today? Drop a comment and let me know. Now let's go back to where it all began. The boy is born on December 1, 1949 in Rio Negro, a farming town in the department of Antioquia. His father, Abel de Jesus Dari Escobar, tends cattle and works the land. His mother, Hamilda Gaviria, teaches in a rural schoolhouse. They are not poor by the standards of the Colombian countryside, but they are far from wealthy. The family lives modestly. There are 7 children. Pablo is the third. The country around Rio Negro is mountainous and green, with coffee plantations terracing the hillsides. When Pablo is still young, the family moves to Envigado, a suburb on the southern edge of Medellín. The city is growing, factories are being built, peasants are leaving the countryside and crowding into the barrios that climb the steep valley walls. Medellín in the 1950s is a city of sharp contrasts. In El Poblado, the wealthy live in homes with gardens and walls. In the comunas that cling to the hillsides, families live in shacks made of scrap wood and corrugated metal. The rich send their children to private schools. The poor send theirs to work. Abel Escobar works hard but advances little. Hamilda keeps the household together. She is fierce and protective, especially of Pablo. The boy grows up watching his father's limited success despite honest labor. He watches the wealthy pass in expensive cars. He sees that there are rules for the rich and different rules for everyone else. The disparity is everywhere young Pablo looks. On his way to school, he passes through neighborhoods where the streets are paved and clean, where houses have electricity and running water. Then he returns home to streets of packed dirt that turn to mud when it rains. He sees his father come home exhausted, hands calloused and cracked, earning barely enough to feed the family. Meanwhile, he sees businessmen and politicians driven in sleek automobiles, their hands soft, their clothes expensive. The lesson is absorbed without anyone teaching it explicitly. Honest work does not pay. The system is not designed for people like his family to rise. The only people from the barrios who escape poverty are those who find another way. Hermilda notices her son's intelligence early. He has a quick mind and an even quicker temper. When other children tease him, he does not cry or run away. He fights back, often against larger boys, with a ferocity that surprises everyone. He learns that aggression, when properly applied, brings results. Teachers notice this too. He could be a good student if he applied himself, but he is restless, always looking out the window, always questioning why he should learn things that will not make him money. What good is mathematics when the rich stay rich no matter what equation you solve? What value is history when the present is all that matters? By the time he is 12, Pablo has developed a worldview that will guide him the rest of his life. The world is divided into those who have power and those who do not. Morality is a luxury invented by the powerful to control the powerless. The law is not about justice, it is about maintaining the existing order, and if you want to change your position in that order, you must be willing to do what others will not. These are not abstract philosophical conclusions. These are practical observations drawn from daily life in Medellín in the early 1960s. The school he attends is adequate but not distinguished. He is intelligent but restless. He does not finish secondary education. What does a boy like him do in a city like this? He could work in a factory. He could try to get a government job. He could follow his father into marginal agriculture. Or he could look for another way. Medellín in the 1960s is a city where another way is always available for those willing to take it. The boy is willing. He starts small. He sells contraband cigarettes. He sells fake lottery tickets. He steals tombstones from graveyards, sands off the names, and resells them. These are not the crimes of someone desperate. These are the crimes of someone testing boundaries. He is learning what he can get away with. He is learning who will stop him and who will look the other way. He is learning that in Medellín, many people will look the other way if you make it worth their time. The tombstone operation is particularly instructive. He scouts cemeteries, identifying recent burials in sections where families clearly have some money but not enough to visit regularly. He waits a few weeks, then returns at night with a helper. They pry the stones loose, load them onto a borrowed truck, take them to a workshop where an associate sands off the inscriptions. The stones are then resold to monument dealers who do not ask questions. The markup is substantial, the risk is minimal. Who reports a stolen tombstone? What family wants to admit their loved one's grave has been desecrated? It is a perfect crime in its way, high profit, low risk, victims who suffer privately rather than report publicly. But more than the money, the operation teaches Pablo about systems. He learns that every business, legitimate or otherwise, requires suppliers, processors, distributors, and customers. He learns that discretion is more valuable than strength. He learns that the best crimes are those where victims do not realize they have been victimized until much later, if at all. And he learns that there is a vast underground economy in Medellín, a shadow city operating parallel to the official one, where goods and services flow outside legal channels, where agreements are enforced by reputation and violence rather than contracts and courts. He meets men who can teach him more sophisticated operations. One of them is Álvaro Prieto, a contraband smuggler who runs goods across the Venezuelan border. Prieto introduces the young Escobar to networks that move untaxed whiskey, electronics, and cigarettes. The profit margins are better than tombstones. The risks are manageable. The police can be paid. Pablo Escobar is not yet 20 years old, and he is learning the fundamental architecture of his future empire. Identify what people want, find a way to provide it cheaper than legal suppliers, use violence when necessary, and always bribe the authorities before you threaten them. Prieto becomes something of a mentor during this period. He is older, more experienced, connected to networks that stretch across South America. He teaches Pablo how to identify corrupt officials, how to approach them, how much to pay. He teaches him that most people have a price, but the key is finding it. Some want money, others want protection for their own illegal activities, still others simply want to feel important, to be on the inside of something significant. A good bribe is tailored to the individual. A lazy bribe is just throwing cash and hoping it sticks. Prieto also teaches Pablo about violence and its proper application. Violence, he explains, is a tool like any other. Use it too much and you attract attention. Use it too little and people do not take you seriously. The art is in calibration. A single dramatic example, a punishment that everyone hears about, can be more effective than a dozen quiet killings. The goal is not to kill everyone who crosses you. The goal is to kill enough people in sufficiently memorable ways that others decide not to cross you in the first place. Pablo absorbs these lessons. He watches how Prieto operates, how he maintains relationships with suppliers and customers, how he manages subordinates, how he insulates himself from direct criminal activity through layers of intermediaries. He sees that successful criminals do not commit crimes personally. They build organizations that commit crimes on their behalf. The distance provides protection. If someone is arrested, they cannot implicate you because they have never met you. It is organization at a distance, power without direct contact. In 1971, he is arrested for car theft. The charges are dropped. In 1974, he is arrested in possession of 39 kilograms of cocaine. The case is never prosecuted, the pattern is established, the system is not strong enough to hold him, or perhaps more accurately, the system is not interested in holding him. By the mid-1970s, cocaine is beginning to flow north from Colombia in quantities never seen before. The drug has been around for decades, but the market is exploding. In the United States, cocaine is the drug of choice for a generation that has money and wants to feel invincible. The demand is bottomless. The profit margins are extraordinary. A kilogram of coca paste costs a few $100s in the jungles of Peru or Bolivia. That same kilogram, refined into powder and sold in Miami or New York, is worth tens of thousands. For someone like Pablo Escobar, someone who has already learned how to move contraband, someone who understands that laws are suggestions enforced unequally, someone who is not troubled by violence, this is an opportunity that will never come again. He seizes it. By 1975, he is actively trafficking cocaine. He's not the first, he's not the only one, but he will become the most successful. The cocaine trade in the mid-70s is still relatively disorganized. Small operators buy paste from producers, refine it in makeshift labs, and smuggle it north in suitcases or body cavities. The quantities are modest, the methods are primitive. Escobar sees the inefficiency immediately. Why buy paste from a dozen different suppliers when you could contract with producers directly? Why refine in small batches when you could build a proper lab and refine in bulk? Why smuggle in suitcases when you could charter a plane? His first major cocaine operation nearly ends in disaster. He arranges to buy 50 kilograms of paste from a Peruvian supplier, more than he has ever handled before. The deal is set up through intermediaries. The payment is made in advance, which is a mistake. When Pablo's associate arrives at the agreed location in the jungle outside Letizia, the supplier is not there. Instead, there are two armed men who take the money and leave the associate tied to a tree. By the time he is found, the suppliers are long gone. $50,000, an enormous sum for Escobar at the time, simply vanished. A younger Pablo might have accepted the loss, but by now he has absorbed Prieto's lessons about the strategic use of violence. Losing the money is bad. Allowing people to think they can steal from him with impunity is worse. He spends weeks tracking the suppliers, paying for information, following leads across the Peruvian border. When he finally identifies them, they are living well in a town 300 miles from Leticia, spending his money openly in bars and brothels. Pablo does not go himself. He sends 2 men. The suppliers are found in a cantina. They are taken outside. Their bodies are discovered the next morning in a ditch outside town, each shot once in the back of the head. The message reaches the right people. Within the networks of paste suppliers and cocaine traffickers, the story spreads. Pablo Escobar is not someone to cheat. He will spend more money finding you than you stole from him. He will wait as long as necessary, and when he finds you, the outcome is not negotiable. From that point forward, suppliers do not cheat him. They might charge high prices, they might drive hard bargains, but they deliver what they promise. Reputation, Pablo is learning, is everything. A reputation for paying well and fairly brings suppliers to you. A reputation for punishing betrayal keeps them honest. What separates Escobar from the other traffickers operating in Colombia at this time is his vision of scale. Most smugglers think in terms of individual shipments. Escobar thinks in terms of infrastructure. He begins building an integrated operation that controls every stage of production and distribution. He establishes relationships with coca growers in Peru and Bolivia. He builds processing labs in the Colombian countryside where coca paste is refined into cocaine hydrochloride. He creates transportation networks using small aircraft, speedboats, and eventually tunnels and submarines. He develops distribution cells in the United States that can move product and collect payment. He does not just sell cocaine, he industrializes it. By the end of the decade, he is moving hundreds of kilograms per month. The money is staggering. It comes in faster than it can be counted. He will later tell associates that they lose 10% of their cash every year to rats eating bills in storage and to money rotting in buried containers. 10% is acceptable wastage when you are making billions. The labs he constructs are marvels of improvised engineering. Deep in rural areas where the government has no presence, he builds facilities that can process thousands of kilograms of paste per month. The structures are simple, corrugated metal roofs over concrete slabs, but the chemistry is sophisticated. He hires chemists, some trained at universities, others self-taught, and pays them salaries that make their former lives irrelevant. The process of converting paste to cocaine hydrochloride requires precise measurements and careful temperature control. Mistakes can ruin entire batches or cause explosions. But when done correctly, the result is a product of exceptional purity, far superior to what most competitors produce. High purity means customers are willing to pay premium prices. It means distributors trust the product. It means reputation, again, is enhanced. Security at these labs is intense. Armed guards patrol the perimeter. Approaches are monitored. Local communities are paid to report strangers. In some cases, entire villages are effectively on Escobar's payroll, the adults employed in various support roles, their children educated in schools he funds. This creates loyalty and control. The military or police could raid these labs, but they would need intelligence about their location, and that intelligence is not available because everyone who knows is either employed by Escobar or terrified of him. Transportation is the next challenge. Cocaine is compact and valuable, but it still needs to be moved thousands of miles from Colombian labs to American cities. The Caribbean in the late 70s is a patchwork of poorly monitored islands and airstrips. Escobar develops relationships with pilots, some of them former military, others civilian aviators, looking for better pay than commercial flying offers. He buys planes, mostly small propeller aircraft that can land on short runways or even cleared fields. The planes are loaded in Colombia, flown to islands in the Bahamas or along the Florida Keys, where the cargo is transferred to boats or vehicles for the final leg into Miami or other entry points. The logistical complexity is enormous. Every shipment requires coordination among coca suppliers, lab operators, transporters, distribution cells, and money handlers. Any link in the chain can break. A plane can be intercepted. A boat can sink. A distributor can be arrested. But Escobar builds redundancy into the system. Multiple shipments run simultaneously along different routes. If one is lost, others get through. The overall flow continues, and the profits are so immense that even significant losses are absorbable. In 1979, he formalizes his operation with three brothers from a wealthy Medellín family, the Ochoas, and a flamboyant trafficker named Carlos Leda. Together they form what will become known as the Medellín Cartel. The term cartel is somewhat misleading. It suggests a formal organization with clear hierarchy and defined territory. What Escobar actually creates is more like a network of aligned interests. He is the dominant figure, but he rules through a combination of profit sharing and terror. Those who cooperate become rich. Those who oppose him die. It is a simple system, and it works. The Ochoa brothers bring legitimacy and connections. Their family owns cattle ranches and other legal businesses which provide cover and money laundering opportunities. Carlos Leda brings audacity and vision. He purchases an island in the Bahamas and effectively turns it into a cocaine transshipment hub, bribing the local government and operating almost openly. Leda is flamboyant where Escobar is calculating, prone to grand gestures and political rhetoric, but his operational contributions are significant. Together, this group forms the core of what will become a criminal empire unmatched in history. The distribution network in the United States is perhaps the most sophisticated element of the operation. Escobar does not simply dump cocaine into American cities and hope for the best. He establishes cells in Miami, New York, Los Angeles, Houston, and Chicago. Each cell operates independently, insulated from the others. The members are often Colombian immigrants, people with family connections back home who serve as de facto hostages. The system is elegant in its brutality. If a distributor cooperates and delivers payments, his family in Colombia prospers. If he steals or cooperates with police, his family suffers. This creates a powerful incentive structure. Most people will betray their country. Few will betray their mother. The cocaine arrives in the United States in various forms. Sometimes it is hidden in shipments of legitimate goods, flowers from Colombia being a favorite because their smell masks drug-sniffing dogs. Sometimes it is carried by human mules who swallow condoms filled with powder, risking death if the packaging ruptures. Sometimes it arrives by boat, transferred at sea from larger vessels to speedboats that race to shore under cover of darkness. The methods vary, but the volume is consistent. Hundreds of kilograms per week flow into American cities. Once in the country, the cocaine moves through a distribution hierarchy. Wholesale distributors buy multi-kilogram quantities and break them down for mid-level dealers. Those dealers cut the product, mixing it with inert substances to increase volume and profit. Street-level dealers sell to users. At each level, the price increases and the purity decreases. A kilogram that cost a few $1,000s to produce in Colombia might generate $50,000 in wholesale revenue in Miami. That same kilogram, after being cut and distributed, might generate $100,000 or more in street sales. The profit margins are extraordinary at every level, and Escobar controls the supply. He is not the only cocaine trafficker, but he is by far the largest. He can flood markets or restrict supply, depending on strategy. He can undercut competitors or raise prices when demand is high. He operates like a monopolist in an unregulated market, which is essentially what he is. Money laundering becomes a challenge as large as smuggling. Cash pours in from American distributors faster than it can be processed. Escobar develops relationships with banks in Panama, the Cayman Islands, and other jurisdictions with lax oversight. Money is deposited in shell accounts, transferred through multiple institutions to obscure its origin, then invested in legitimate businesses or moved back to Colombia. He purchases properties, restaurants, car dealerships, anything that generates cash and can justify large deposits. Some money is never laundered at all. It is simply buried or hidden in walls, vast caches of currency that represent wealth too dirty to spend but too valuable to discard. The American government is slow to recognize the scale of the problem. The Drug Enforcement Administration exists, but it is underfunded and focused primarily on domestic production of marijuana and heroin. Cocaine, in the early days of Escobar's operation, is seen as a recreational drug for the wealthy, not a major threat. This changes as the volume increases and cocaine becomes cheaper and more widely available. By the early 1980s, American law enforcement is scrambling to respond, but they are always behind. Escobar adapts faster than they can react. When interdiction increases in Florida, he shifts routes to Mexico. When surveillance improves in one city, he expands in another. The dynamic is asymmetric. Law enforcement must protect everywhere. Escobar only needs to succeed somewhere. Early meetings among the partners are businesslike. They sit in ranches or safe houses, maps spread on tables, discussing routes and methods with the detachment of corporate executives planning logistics. How many flights per week can be sustained? Which American cities have the best distribution networks? How should profits be divided? What happens if someone is arrested? These are practical questions, and they are answered practically. The agreement is straightforward. Each partner operates semi-independently but shares intelligence and resources. Major decisions are made collectively. Profits are divided based on contribution, and betrayal is punished by death. There is no written contract, no legal framework. There is only mutual interest and mutual fear. It is enough. The money transforms him. In 1976, he marries Maria Victoria Henao. She is 15 years old. He is 26. The marriage will last until his death. She will remain loyal even when that loyalty costs her everything. They have 2 children, a son named Juan Pablo, born in 1977, and a daughter named Manuela, born in 1984. Escobar is, by all accounts, genuinely devoted to his family. He builds them a sprawling estate called Hacienda Nápoles, complete with a private zoo, stocked with hippos, elephants, and exotic birds. He collects vintage cars, he throws lavish parties, he gives generously to friends and associates. He is building the life that his father could never provide. Hacienda Nápoles is a statement of arrival. Spanning thousands of acres, it features a main house designed to impress, with marble floors and chandeliers imported from Europe. The zoo is stocked with animals acquired from around the world, legally and otherwise: hippos from Africa, giraffes, elephants, exotic birds in aviaries. There is a bull ring for entertainment, lakes stocked with fish, helipads for easy access. The property is equipped with its own airstrip, officially for private travel but actually for cocaine shipments. The entrance is marked by a gate featuring a small airplane mounted on a pedestal, the same plane Escobar used for one of his first major smuggling runs, preserved as a monument to his success. The estate serves multiple purposes. It is a home where his children can grow up surrounded by beauty and wealth. It is a symbol to associates and rivals that Pablo Escobar has made it, that he is no longer a street criminal but a man of substance. It is a fortress, remote and defensible, where he can retreat when necessary, and it is a fantasy, a theme park where he plays the role of the benevolent patron, hosting parties where champagne flows and musicians perform, where the food is abundant and the guests are grateful. He loves showing the zoo to visitors, especially children. He walks among the animals like a king in his domain, pointing out the hippos, explaining where they came from, laughing as they wallow in the water. In these moments he seems almost innocent, a man who simply loves his family and enjoys sharing his good fortune. It is a performance, but he seems to believe it himself. Maria Victoria's life during this period is complicated. She marries young before she fully understands what her husband does for a living. By the time she realizes, she is already pregnant, already committed. Pablo is attentive and affectionate. He showers her with gifts, expensive jewelry, designer clothes, anything she wants. He protects her fiercely from the violence that defines his business. He does not discuss specifics with her, does not involve her in decisions. She lives in a bubble of luxury and ignorance, raising their children, managing the household, hosting gatherings. Does she know what he does? Of course. Does she know the extent of it? Probably not. Or perhaps she knows and chooses not to think about it, compartmentalizing in the way that family members of criminals often do. He is two people to her, the violent man the world sees and the loving husband and father she knows at home. Both are real, both coexist, and she focuses on the latter because the alternative is unbearable, but he is also building something else. He is building a public image. In the early 1980s, Escobar begins positioning himself as a champion of the poor. He constructs hundreds of houses in a Medellín barrio that he names after himself. He builds soccer fields and community centers. He hands out cash to people in the streets. The residents of the comunas adore him. They call him Don Pablo. They see him as one of their own, who made it, who remembers where he came from, who gives back. This image is not accidental. Escobar understands that popular support is a form of protection. If the people love him, the government cannot move against him without facing backlash. If the people love him, they will hide him when he needs hiding. They will not cooperate with police. They will see him as a hero and his enemies as oppressors. It is brilliant strategy. It is also fundamentally cynical, because while he is building houses in Medellín, he is also killing anyone who threatens his business. Judges, journalists, police officers, politicians, rival traffickers. The body count is already in the hundreds by the time he decides to enter politics. The housing project in Barrio Pablo Escobar is executed with care. He does not simply throw money at contractors and walk away. He involves himself in the planning. The houses are modest but solid, with running water and electricity which many residents have never had before. The streets are paved. There are parks and playgrounds. The construction provides jobs to local men. The completion is celebrated with a massive party where Escobar himself appears, mingling with families, playing soccer with children, posing for photographs. He makes speeches about dignity and community, about how everyone deserves a decent place to live, about how the government has abandoned these neighborhoods, but he will not. The residents cheer, they carry him on their shoulders, they see him as a savior. And perhaps in some sense, he is. The government has indeed abandoned these neighborhoods. The state provides almost nothing in terms of services, infrastructure, or economic opportunity. Into that vacuum steps Pablo Escobar with money and attention. The fact that the money comes from poisoning Americans with cocaine is an abstraction. The houses are real. The soccer fields are real. The cash he hands out is real. And so the loyalty he builds is real. Years later, when the Search Bloc comes hunting him, the people of these barrios will hide him, will refuse to cooperate, will attack police when they enter. That loyalty is purchased here, in these moments of staged generosity, and it is worth every dollar he spends. In 1982, Pablo Escobar is elected as an alternate member of the Colombian Congress. He runs as part of the Liberal Party. His campaign emphasizes social justice and his work helping the poor. His criminal background is known but not widely publicized. He is sworn in. He receives congressional immunity from prosecution. For a brief moment, it appears that he might actually achieve what he wants most: legitimacy. Not just wealth, not just power, but acceptance. He wants to be seen as a statesman. He wants his children to grow up as members of respectable society. He wants the elites who looked down on his family to acknowledge him as their equal. His time in Congress is brief but telling. He attends sessions wearing expensive suits, trying to project an image of respectability. He proposes legislation to help the poor, to build housing, to create jobs. Some of his proposals are actually reasonable, others are transparently self-serving, designed to hamper law enforcement or benefit his business interests. His fellow congressmen are divided. Some refuse to acknowledge him, viewing him as a criminal who has purchased his seat. Others are pragmatic, recognizing that he has money and influence and might be useful. A few are already on his payroll. The atmosphere is tense. Escobar sits in the chamber as if he belongs there, but everyone knows he does not. He is a gangster pretending to be a politician, and the pretense fools no one even if it cannot be openly challenged. He revels in the trappings of office. The immunity from prosecution is particularly valuable, making it nearly impossible for law enforcement to touch him. He uses congressional stationery for correspondence. He arranges for photographs of himself at official functions, which he distributes in the comunas as proof of his legitimacy. Look, the images say, Don Pablo is not a criminal. He is a congressman. He represents you in the halls of power. The message is effective, at least among those who want to believe it, but there is a problem. His past cannot be erased, and there is one man who refuses to pretend otherwise. His name is Rodrigo Lara Bonilla, and he is the Minister of Justice. In August 1983, Lara Bonilla stands before the Colombian Congress and exposes Escobar's criminal record. He presents documentation of arrests, of associates murdered, of cocaine seized. He demands that Escobar be stripped of his immunity and expelled from Congress. The speech is politically devastating. Escobar's brief political career collapses. He is forced to resign. His dream of legitimacy dies. The humiliation is total, and Pablo Escobar does not forgive humiliation. The speech is delivered with controlled fury. Lara Bonilla is a small man with glasses and a quiet voice, but his words carry weight. He stands at the podium with documents in hand, methodically listing Escobar's crimes. The chamber is silent. Some congressmen look uncomfortable. Others nod in agreement. Escobar sits frozen, his face expressionless, but those who know him can see the rage building behind his eyes. When Lara Bonilla finishes, there is scattered applause. The session adjourns. Escobar leaves without speaking to anyone. In the days that follow, he tries to salvage his position. He gives interviews claiming the accusations are lies spread by political enemies. He points to his charitable work, his housing projects, his support for the poor. It is a desperate performance, and it fails. The evidence Lara Bonilla presented is too substantial. The media, which had largely ignored Escobar's criminal activities, now begins investigating. Stories appear detailing his smuggling operations, his arrests, his suspected involvement in murders. The respectable image he worked so hard to build crumbles in a matter of weeks. By the end of the year, he is forced to resign from Congress. The immunity is gone, the legitimacy he craved is irretrievably lost, and he blames one man, Rodrigo Lara Bonilla. On April 30th, 1984, Rodrigo Lara Bonilla is assassinated in Bogotá. He is riding in the back seat of his car when two men on a motorcycle pull alongside. The man on the back of the motorcycle fires multiple times. Lara Bonilla dies before reaching the hospital. The killing is brazen and public. It is meant to send a message. The message is received. The Colombian government, under President Belisario Betancourt, reacts with unprecedented severity. Betancourt reinstates the extradition treaty with the United States, which had been allowed to lapse. This is the one thing Escobar fears more than death. Extradition means losing control. It means being sent to an American prison where he has no power, no ability to bribe guards, no leverage over prosecutors. He has said many times that he would prefer to die in Colombia. The The government's decision to resume extradition is effectively a declaration of war. Escobar accepts the terms. The assassination is executed with cold precision. The motorcycle is stolen earlier that day. The shooters are young, barely out of their teens, recruited from the comunas where Escobar is a hero. They are paid a few $1,000s each and told that killing Lara Bonilla is a patriotic act, a strike against a corrupt minister who persecutes the people's champion. Whether they believe this is unclear. What is clear is that they are willing to kill for money and recognition. They follow Lara Bonilla's car through Bogotá traffic, waiting for the right moment. When it comes, they accelerate alongside. The passenger leans out with a machine pistol and empties the magazine through the window. The car swerves and crashes. Lara Bonilla is dead before the ambulance arrives. The motorcycle disappears into traffic. The shooters abandon it blocks away and vanish into the city. The public reaction is immediate and intense. Lara Bonilla was widely respected, seen as one of the few honest officials willing to stand up to the cartels. His murder makes clear that no one is safe, that the traffickers will kill anyone, regardless of position or prominence. President Betancourt, who had been ambivalent about pursuing the cartels aggressively, is forced to act. The extradition treaty, which Colombian politicians had allowed to quietly expire because it was unpopular and dangerous to enforce, is reinstated. The Colombian military is authorized to raid suspected cartel properties without warrants. Cooperation with American drug enforcement agencies is expanded. The gloves are off. For Escobar, this is an existential threat. Extradition means losing everything. It means being taken from Colombia, from his family, from his power base, and locked in an American supermax prison where his money and connections are worthless. It means spending the rest of his life in a cell, isolated and impotent. He has said repeatedly that he would rather die in Colombia than be extradited. Now he must prove it. The decision to kill Lara Bonilla was meant to intimidate the government. Instead, it has provoked them to total war. And Pablo Escobar, for all his wealth and power, has just made the mistake that will eventually destroy him. What follows is a campaign of narco-terrorism unlike anything Colombia has experienced. Escobar and the Medellín Cartel begin targeting the Colombian state systematically. They kill judges, prosecutors, and police officers by the dozens. They bomb government buildings. They assassinate journalists who write about the drug trade. The violence is designed to force the government to negotiate, to make the cost of fighting so high that surrender becomes preferable. The strategy is deliberate. Escobar convenes meetings with his top associates to plan the campaign. They identify targets systematically. Judges handling extradition cases are marked for death. Prosecutors building cases against cartel members are targeted. Police commanders leading anti-narcotics units are assassinated. The killings are not random. They are strategic, designed to paralyze the justice system. And they work. Judges begin resigning rather than hear drug cases. Prosecutors decline to file charges. Police officers refuse assignments to anti-narcotics units. The brave ones, those who continue despite the threats, are killed one by one. The message is unambiguous: oppose us and die. Eventually there are not enough brave ones left. Journalists are targeted with equal ruthlessness. Newspapers that publish investigative reports on the cartels receive threats. When threats are ignored, editors are killed. Guillermo Cano of El Espectador is gunned down outside his office. Others are car-bombed or shot in their homes. Entire news organizations pull back from covering the drug trade. Reporters who want to write about it are told by their editors that it is too dangerous, that the paper cannot protect them, that the story is not worth their lives. Self-censorship becomes the norm. The public stops receiving accurate information about the cartel's activities, which is exactly what Escobar wants. Operating in darkness is easier than operating under scrutiny. The assassination of Guillermo Cano is particularly emblematic of the era. Cano is not a young firebrand, but a respected elder statesman of Colombian journalism, 61 years old, with decades of distinguished reporting behind him. His newspaper, El Espectador, has been chronicling the rise of the cartels with increasing alarm. Cano publishes stories about corruption, about politicians on cartel payrolls, about the scale of cocaine trafficking. He knows he is making himself a target. Colleagues urge him to back off. His family begs him to stop. He refuses. On December 17th, 1986, he is driving home from the newspaper's offices. Two men on a motorcycle pull alongside his car at a stoplight. They fire 9 times. Cano dies instantly. The killers disappear into Bogotá traffic. The message to Colombian journalism is unmistakable. In the wake of Cano's death, something shifts in the Colombian media landscape. Some publications double down, vowing to continue his work, to expose the cartels no matter the cost. Others quietly pull back, editors making decisions to keep their reporters alive, even if it means the public remains uninformed. The choice is impossible. Pursue the story and risk death. Stay silent and become complicit. Many journalists leave the profession entirely, finding work in safer fields. Others leave Colombia, seeking exile in countries where writing about drug trafficking does not carry a death sentence. The brain drain is significant. The best investigative reporters, the ones with the skills and courage to hold power accountable, are killed or driven away. What remains is a weakened press corps, intimidated and self-censoring, unable to fulfill its democratic function. But not everyone is silent. Some continue despite the danger. They write under pseudonyms, they publish from exile, they find ways to tell the truth, even when the truth is deadly. These journalists become heroes in Colombian history, though many of their names are forgotten now. They documented atrocities when documentation meant risking everything. They kept records when the powerful wanted no record kept. They maintained a fragile thread of accountability in a time when accountability seemed impossible. And many of them paid with their lives. The names scroll by like a terrible roll call. Jorge Enrique Pulido, shot dead after publishing an exposé on cartel finances. Luis Gabriel Garcia, killed with his cameraman while covering a story. Sylvia Duzan, who survived an assassination attempt but continued reporting. Dozens more whose names never made international headlines, but whose courage kept Colombian journalism alive during its darkest hour. In 1985, the M19 guerrilla group storms the Palace of Justice in Bogotá. The siege lasts 28 hours. More than 100 people die, including 11 Supreme Court justices. The government responds with tanks and troops. By the time the building is retaken, much of it is destroyed by fire. The official narrative is that M19 acted alone, but there is evidence, disputed and incomplete, that the Medellín Cartel helped finance the operation. The Supreme Court had been hearing extradition cases. The files were destroyed in the fire. Whether Escobar was directly involved remains unclear. What is clear is that the attack accomplished his objective. The extradition process was disrupted. The message to judges was unmistakable: rule against us and die. The Palace of Justice siege is chaos from beginning to end. M19 guerrillas, heavily armed, storm the building in broad daylight. They take hundreds of hostages, including Supreme Court justices, employees and visitors. Their demands are confused and contradictory. Something about putting the president on trial, something about injustices committed by the state. The government, rather than negotiate, decides to retake the building by force. Tanks fire on the palace. Soldiers assault through smoke and gunfire. The guerrillas resist fiercely. Hostages are caught in the crossfire. By the time it ends, the building is gutted by fire, bodies are everywhere, and the Supreme Court's archives, including all extradition files, are destroyed. The question of Escobar's involvement will never be fully answered. Some M19 members who survived claim the cartel paid them to destroy the extradition files. Others deny it. What is documented is that the files are gone. What is certain is that Escobar benefits. Extradition cases that were weeks away from completion are now impossible to proceed with. New cases must be built from scratch. And the attack sends a message to any judge considering signing an extradition order. This is what happens when you oppose us. We can reach you anywhere, even in the Supreme Court itself. The message is received. For years afterward, judges refuse to handle extradition cases. When they are forced to, they rule in favor of defendants. The system, already fragile, collapses entirely, but the violence is escalating beyond even Escobar's control. The Medellín Cartel is not the only trafficking organization in Colombia. The Cali Cartel, run by the Rodriguez Orejuela brothers, operates with a different philosophy. Where Escobar is flamboyant and violent, the Cali Cartel is discreet and sophisticated. They prefer bribery to bombs. They cultivate relationships with politicians and military officers. They see Escobar's narco-terrorism as bad for business. It draws attention. It provokes government crackdowns that hurt everyone. By the late 1980s, the two cartels are in open conflict. Escobar is fighting on multiple fronts, against the Colombian government, against the United States Drug Enforcement Administration, against the Cali Cartel, and increasingly against factions within his own organization who question his strategy. The pressure is immense, and he responds with more violence. The conflict with Cali is rooted in both business and philosophy. The Rodriguez Orejuela brothers, Gilberto and Miguel, run their organization like a multinational corporation. They have accountants and lawyers. They invest profits in legitimate businesses. They avoid publicity. They cultivate politicians through campaign contributions and favors rather than through threats. Their approach is working. They control significant trafficking routes and are making billions, all while maintaining a much lower profile than the Medellín Cartel. They see Escobar as reckless, a man whose ego and violence are bringing heat on the entire industry. Escobar, for his part, sees the Cali Cartel as weak and hypocritical. They traffic cocaine just like he does, but they pretend to be respectable. They bribe just like he does, but they act as if they are somehow different, somehow better. The tension escalates through the late 80s. Shipments are intercepted, distributors are poached, associates are killed. By 1988, it is open warfare. Car bombs explode outside Cali properties. Medellín associates are assassinated. The Rodriguez Orejuelas, realizing they cannot match Escobar's capacity for violence, make a fateful decision. They offer to cooperate with the Colombian government against him. They provide intelligence on his whereabouts, his associates, his operations. In exchange, they ask for lenient treatment when they are eventually arrested. The government, desperate for any advantage, accepts. Escobar is now fighting a war on all sides, and some of his enemies are using the state's resources against him. In 1989, he orders the assassination of Luis Carlos Galán, a leading presidential candidate who had promised to continue the fight against the cartels. Galán is shot at a campaign rally on August 18th. His death shocks the nation. The government's response is to intensify its pursuit of Escobar. The military and police are given broader powers. Extradition requests are expedited. Escobar realizes he is losing. He decides to send an even more emphatic message. Galán's assassination is particularly brazen. He is speaking at a rally in Soacha, a town near Bogotá. Thousands of supporters are present. Security is tight, but not tight enough. A gunman works his way to the front of the crowd. As Galán begins speaking, the man pulls a machine pistol and fires repeatedly. Galán falls. The crowd scatters in panic. The gunman is tackled by security, but Galán is already dead. The killer is a young sicario from Medellín, another teenager paid a few $1,000s to murder one of Colombia's most prominent politicians. He is arrested, tried, and imprisoned. He will later say he had no idea who Galán was, that it was just another job. This is perhaps the most chilling aspect of the killing. It was not personal. It was business. Galan died because Escobar needed him dead, and Escobar had the resources to make it happen. The national reaction is seismic. Galan was seen as the future of Colombian democracy, a charismatic leader who spoke about justice and equality, who promised to take on the cartels and restore the rule of law. His murder makes clear that the narcos will kill anyone, that they have no respect for democracy, that they are willing to destroy the country to protect their business. Hundreds of thousands attend his funeral. The incoming president, Cesar Gaviria, vows to continue Galan's fight. The Colombian military launches raids on cartel properties across the country. Dozens of associates are arrested. Escobar's labs and safe houses are destroyed. The pressure is unprecedented, and Escobar's response is to escalate even further. On November 27, 1989, Avianca Flight 203 takes off from Bogotá bound for Cali. 12 minutes into the flight, a bomb hidden in the cabin explodes. The plane disintegrates in midair. All 107 people aboard are killed. The target was supposedly a single informant who might testify against the cartel. That informant was not on the plane. He had changed his travel plans at the last minute. 107 innocent people died for nothing. The bombing is a turning point. Until now, Escobar's violence has been targeted, even if the targets included civilians. This is indiscriminate. This is terrorism in the purest sense. The Colombian public, which had tolerated or even supported him, begins to turn. The government, which had shown some willingness to negotiate, hardens its position. Even some of Escobar's own associates begin to question whether his strategy is sustainable. The bombing is executed by a young man who does not even know there is a bomb in his luggage. He is told to carry a package onto the flight, told it contains a recording device that will activate when the informant begins speaking. He is promised payment upon landing. He boards the flight with the package in his carry-on. 12 minutes into the flight, at an altitude of 13,000 feet, the bomb detonates. The explosion tears through the fuselage. The plane breaks apart. Passengers and debris rain down on the countryside below. There are no survivors. The young man who carried the bomb aboard is dead, along with everyone else. He was used and discarded, a disposable tool in Escobar's war. The intended target, the informant, watches the news that night from his home, realizing how close he came to death and how many others died in his place. The images of the wreckage dominate Colombian television for days. Twisted metals scattered across fields, personal belongings, luggage, seats, bodies. Recovery teams work in grim silence, collecting remains and fragments. Families of victims gather at the airport, some collapsing in grief when the news is confirmed. The nation is in shock. This is not a killing of a judge or politician. This is mass murder. These are ordinary people, businessmen and tourists and families who happened to be on the wrong flight. Among the dead are students, mothers, children, people with dreams and futures that ended in a fireball at 13,000 feet. The public outrage is total. Even in the comunas where Escobar is loved, people begin to question, how does murdering 100 innocents help the poor? How is this defending Colombia against American imperialism? The narrative Escobar has carefully constructed begins to crack. The bombing campaign continues. On December 6, 1989, a truck bomb detonates outside the DAS building in Bogotá. DAS is Colombia's civilian intelligence agency. The explosion kills 52 people and wounds hundreds. Most of the dead are civilians who happen to be nearby. The blast destroys buildings for blocks. It is the deadliest single attack in Colombian history up to that point. Escobar's war on the state is becoming a war on Colombian society itself. The violence is not just calculated terrorism anymore. It is spiraling. The man who once built houses for the poor is now killing them by the hundreds. The man who wanted to be seen as a champion of the people is terrorizing the nation. The DAS bombing is even more powerful than the Avianca attack. A truck loaded with 500 kilograms of dynamite is parked outside the agency's headquarters during morning rush hour. The driver sets the timer and walks away. At 7:30 a.m., when the streets are full of people heading to work, the bomb detonates. The explosion is heard across the city. The DAS building's front facade collapses. Windows shatter for blocks. Cars are flipped and incinerated. Bodies are thrown hundreds of feet by the blast wave. The wounded stagger through smoke and debris covered in blood and dust. Emergency services are overwhelmed. Hospitals fill beyond capacity. The death toll climbs through the day as victims succumb to their injuries. By evening, 52 are confirmed dead. Hundreds more are wounded, some maimed for life. The target was the intelligence agency that had been gathering evidence against the cartel. The victims were secretaries and clerks, bus drivers and street vendors, people who had nothing to do with the drug war, but who happened to be in the wrong place. Among the dead are children, students, who were passing the building on their way to school. This detail, when it emerges, completes the public's turn against Escobar. Whatever sympathy remained evaporates. He is no longer a Robin Hood figure. He is a terrorist who kills children to protect his business. Even his staunchest supporters in the comunas struggle to defend him. The man they call Don Pablo has become a monster. By the end of the 1980s, Pablo Escobar's empire is vast but unstable. He controls more wealth than any criminal in history. He has an army of sicarios willing to die for him. He has safe houses throughout Medellín. He has the support of many in the comunas who still see him as Don Pablo, the man who remembers the poor. But he is also hunted by every law enforcement agency in Colombia and the United States. His allies are dying or defecting. His enemies are multiplying, and he is running out of options. The pressure is constant and unrelenting. He cannot appear in public. He cannot visit his family openly. He moves between safe houses every few days, sleeping in different beds, eating food prepared by people he trusts because he fears poisoning. His paranoia intensifies. He suspects everyone, even long-time associates. Some of those suspicions are justified. The government and the Cali cartel have both infiltrated his organization, bribing or threatening subordinates to provide information. People he has trusted for years are selling him out. The isolation is maddening. He is surrounded by bodyguards but profoundly alone. The psychological deterioration is visible to those close to him. He sleeps poorly, waking at every sound. He obsesses over details, calling subordinates at all hours to verify information he has already confirmed. He becomes convinced that tracking devices have been planted in his clothes, in his shoes, even in his food. He changes phones constantly, sometimes using a device for a single call before destroying it. He grows suspicious of everyone, questioning loyalties that have been tested for years. Some associates cannot bear the paranoia and distance themselves. Others recognize it as a symptom of the unbearable strain he is under. He is living as a fugitive in the city he once dominated, unable to enjoy his wealth, unable to see his family except in brief clandestine meetings, unable to trust anyone completely. The empire he built has become a prison more confining than any the government could construct. By 1991, the Colombian government is desperate to end the violence. President Cesar Gaviria offers Escobar a deal: surrender and face trial in Colombia with a guarantee of no extradition. Escobar accepts. He has one condition: he will surrender, but he will choose his own prison. The government astonishingly agrees. Escobar selects a site on a hilltop outside Medellín. He designs the prison himself. It is called Catedral, the Cathedral. It is a prison in name only. The perimeter is guarded, but the guards are on Escobar's payroll. Inside there is a soccer field, a bar, a jacuzzi, and comfortable bedrooms. Escobar lives there with several of his top associates. He continues to run his drug empire from inside. He meets with family and associates freely. He even brings prostitutes in for parties. The Colombian military is forbidden from approaching within a certain radius. The Catedral is less a prison than a fortified retreat where Escobar is protected from both the government and his enemies. The arrangement is absurd, but it serves the government's purposes. The violence has stopped. Escobar is contained, even if he is hardly imprisoned. For a time, it seems like a workable solution. Life in La Catedral is surreal. Escobar wakes late, often after midnight, phone calls managing cartel business. He eats meals prepared by his own chef. He plays soccer with associates and guards on the full-size field. He watches television on large screens, following news coverage of himself. He receives visitors, family members, and business associates who arrive bearing messages or money. At night, parties are held with music and alcohol, women brought in from Medellín for entertainment. The guards do not interfere. They are paid far more than their government salaries, and they understand that their real employer is not the state, but the man they are supposedly guarding. From inside this comfortable prison, Escobar continues to operate. He issues orders for cocaine shipments. He arranges payments and bribes. He settles disputes among distributors. He orders killings of rivals and informants. The infrastructure of his empire continues to function because he is still in command, still making decisions, still enforcing his will. The only difference is that he is now protected from the Cali cartel and from any government faction that might decide to kill him rather than prosecute him. In many ways, La Catedral is safer than freedom. Then, in July 1992, Escobar learns that the government is planning to transfer him to a real military prison. The reasons are murky. There are reports that he has been killing associates inside La Catedral, settling scores while supposedly incarcerated. There are rumors that the military is preparing to raid the facility. Escobar does not wait to find out. On July 22, 1992, he walks out of La Catedral. The guards do nothing to stop him. He vanishes into Medellín. The killings inside La Catedral involve former associates who Escobar believes have betrayed him or stolen from him. They are lured to the prison under pretenses of meetings. Once inside, they are interrogated, tortured, and killed. The bodies are buried on the grounds. When rumors of these murders reach the government, there is pressure to act. President Gaviria, already embarrassed by the lenient conditions at La Catedral, decides to transfer Escobar to a conventional prison. But the planning is clumsy and leaks. Escobar hears about it from a guard on his payroll. He realizes that if he is transferred, he will lose all control. He will be vulnerable to assassination by the Cali cartel or by government factions. The decision to escape is not difficult. Staying means death. Leaving means at least a chance. The decision to escape is, in retrospect, a fatal mistake. Escobar had negotiated a deal that kept him alive and relatively free. By escaping, he voids that agreement. He is once again a fugitive with no legal protection. The government, humiliated by his escape, commits to hunting him down. The United States, which had been nominally supportive of the Colombian effort, now increases its involvement. The DEA and CIA provide intelligence, surveillance equipment, and training. A special unit of the Colombian National Police, called the Search Bloc, is formed with the sole purpose of capturing or killing Pablo Escobar. It is led by Colonel Hugo Martinez. a career police officer who has lost many men to Escobar's sicarios. The Search Bloc is backed by American technology and Colombian determination, but Escobar has advantages. He knows Medellín intimately. He has supporters in every barrio. He has money to bribe and threaten anyone who gets too close. He moves constantly between safe houses, never staying in one place for more than a few nights. He communicates with his family through intermediaries and brief phone calls. He is hunted by thousands, but he remains free. Colonel Martinez is a methodical man, not given to theatrics or grand speeches. He understands that hunting Escobar is a matter of patience and systems. He organizes the Search Bloc into teams that can respond quickly to intelligence. He works closely with American advisors who bring electronic surveillance equipment capable of tracking radio and phone signals. He cultivates informants, paying for tips, protecting sources. He understands that Escobar's greatest weakness is his need to communicate. A man on the run can hide indefinitely if he is willing to cut all contact. But Escobar cannot resist calling his family. Those calls are his lifeline to normalcy, to the world he has lost, and they will be his undoing. While this is happening, another force enters the hunt. They call themselves Los Pepes, an acronym for People Persecuted by Pablo Escobar. They are a vigilante group, but the term vigilante suggests popular uprising. Los Pepes are almost certainly backed by the Cali cartel, with support from elements of Colombian security forces. Their strategy is brutal and effective. They cannot find Escobar, so they destroy everything around him. They hunt down his associates and kill them. They burn his properties. They threaten his extended family. They murder his lawyers and accountants. The message is clear. If you help Pablo Escobar, you will die. The campaign of terror that Escobar inflicted on Colombia is now being inflicted on him. The pressure is unbearable. His organization begins to collapse. Associates surrender or flee. Safe houses are compromised. Money flows stop. Los Pepes operate with ruthless efficiency. They obtain intelligence from the Cali cartel about Escobar's associates and properties. Armed teams arrive at addresses in Medellín, dragging out anyone connected to Escobar. Lawyers are shot in their offices. Accountants are found dead in their homes. Entire families are murdered as warnings. Properties are burned to the ground. Luxury estates reduced to ash and rubble. The campaign sends a clear message. There is no safety in working for Pablo Escobar. Your wealth will not protect you. Your position will not protect you. You will die, and probably your family too. The psychological effect on Escobar is devastating. He has always protected his people, always ensured that those who work for him are rewarded and shielded. Now he can protect no one, including himself. Associates who have been loyal for years decide that loyalty is a death sentence. Some surrender to police, accepting imprisonment as preferable to assassination. Others simply disappear, fleeing Colombia entirely. The organization that took years to build disintegrates in months. Money and infrastructure mean nothing when people are too terrified to work for you. Escobar's son will later describe phone conversations from this period. His father sounds exhausted and paranoid. He talks about how much he misses his family. He asks about small details of their daily life. He no longer sounds like the kingpin who terrorized a nation. He sounds like a hunted man who knows time is running out. The phone calls are brief and guarded. Escobar knows the line is monitored, but he cannot stop himself from calling. He asks his son Juan Pablo about school, about what he ate for breakfast, about whether he is taking care of his mother and sister. He tells him to be strong, to remember who he is, to never let anyone disrespect the family. Sometimes his voice breaks. He talks about eventually being reunited, about going somewhere safe together, but it sounds like a fantasy even to him. Juan Pablo tries to sound optimistic, tries to tell his father that everything will be okay, but they both know it will not be. These conversations are goodbyes stretched over months, a gradual acknowledgement that they will not see each other again. The end comes because of technology and love. Escobar cannot resist calling his son. The calls are brief, but they are enough. The Search Bloc, with American help, uses radio triangulation equipment to track the location of his phone. On December 1st, 1993, Escobar's 44th birthday, he calls his son, Juan Pablo. The Search Bloc traces the call to a house in the Los Olivos neighborhood of Medellín. They do not move immediately. They wait, tracking subsequent calls, confirming the pattern. By the afternoon of December 2nd, they are certain. The order is given. The raid is launched. The Search Bloc moves into position quietly. Dozens of officers surround the block. Snipers take positions on nearby roofs. Helicopters are scrambled. The operation is coordinated precisely because they know there will be no second chance. If Escobar escapes this time, he will never use a phone again, and they will lose their best chance to find him. Colonel Martinez watches from a command vehicle, monitoring radio traffic, waiting for confirmation that everyone is in place. When it comes, he gives the order, "Move in." Escobar is on the second floor when he realizes what is happening. He has one bodyguard with him, Álvaro de Jesús Agudelo, known as El Limón. They grab weapons and flee toward the roof. The Search Bloc enters the building and begins clearing rooms. Gunfire erupts from above. Escobar and El Limón are shooting down at the soldiers from the roof. The soldiers return fire. Helicopters arrive overhead. The firefight lasts several minutes. Then suddenly it is over. Escobar is hit multiple times. He falls across the terracotta tiles. El Limón is also killed. The soldiers approach cautiously. They confirm the identity. Pablo Escobar is dead. The moment of death is chaos. Bullets are flying from multiple directions. El Limón is firing an automatic weapon wildly, not aiming, just trying to suppress the soldiers below. Escobar fires his pistol more carefully, squeezing off shots at anyone who appears in a doorway or window. The helicopters circle overhead, the downdraft from their rotors scattering tiles and debris. Soldiers fire from below and from adjacent rooftops. The volume of fire is tremendous. Then Escobar is hit. A bullet strikes his torso. He staggers. Another hits his leg. He falls to one knee. El Limón continues firing until he too is hit and collapses. Escobar tries to crawl toward cover, but a final bullet enters behind his right ear and exits through his forehead. He falls forward across the tiles. Blood spreads beneath him. The firing stops. The only sound is the helicopters and the shouts of soldiers confirming the kill. The death scene will be photographed extensively. Escobar lies on the roof, barefoot, blood pooling beneath him. His body is eventually brought down and displayed for the press. Thousands of people line the streets of Medellín to watch the funeral procession. Some mourn, others celebrate. The Colombian government declares victory. The war on the Medellín Cartel is over. But questions remain about the death itself. The official story is that Escobar was killed in the firefight on the roof. But forensic analysis of the body shows that the fatal shot entered behind his right ear and exited through his forehead. The trajectory suggests the gun was fired at close range, possibly by someone standing over him. Some members of the Search Bloc will later claim, off the record, that Escobar was executed after being wounded. Others suggest he might have killed himself rather than be captured. Colonel Hugo Martinez insists the death occurred exactly as reported. Escobar was shot while trying to escape. The truth is probably unknowable at this point. Too many people have an interest in specific narratives. What is certain is that Pablo Escobar died on December 2nd, 1993, one day after his 44th birthday, on a rooftop in the city where he was born. The photographs of Escobar's body spread quickly. Television stations broadcast images of him lying on the roof, then being carried down, then laid out for identification. The Colombian press publishes the photos on front pages. International media picks up the story. The images are stark and undignified. This is not a state funeral for a fallen leader. This is a dead criminal displayed like a trophy. Some members of the Search Bloc pose for photographs with the body, smiling, celebrating. The images are disturbing but also human. These men have been hunting Escobar for over a year. Many have lost colleagues. They are entitled to their moment of triumph, even if it is macabre. The legacy of Pablo Escobar is complex and contested. In the immediate aftermath of his death, there is relief. The bombings stop, the kidnappings stop. The daily terror that gripped Colombia begins to ease, but the drug trade does not stop. The Cali cartel immediately expands to fill the vacuum left by the Medellín cartel's collapse. New organizations emerge. The Norte del Valle cartel, the North Coast cartel, paramilitary groups that traffic cocaine to fund their operations. The fundamental economics that enabled Escobar's rise, the bottomless American demand for cocaine, and the extraordinary profits it generates, remain unchanged. The death of Pablo Escobar ended one organization but did not end the industry. In Medellín, his legacy is contradictory. Some people still speak of him with admiration. They remember the houses he built and the money he gave away. They see him as someone who came from nothing and challenged the system that kept them poor. Others remember the violence. They remember the children recruited as sicarios. They remember the bombs that killed indiscriminately. They remember living in fear. There is a saying in Medellín that captures this ambivalence. Pablo gave with one hand and killed with the other. Both statements are true, and they are impossible to reconcile. Internationally, Escobar's image has been mythologized and commodified. Netflix produced a television series called Narcos that dramatized his life. The show was enormously popular. It portrayed Escobar as a charismatic anti-hero, a family man forced into violence by circumstance. This narrative is factually inaccurate but dramatically compelling. It is part of a broader cultural phenomenon, the romanticization of narco culture. Music, television, and film have created a mythology around drug traffickers that emphasizes wealth and power while minimizing violence and suffering. Pablo Escobar has become a brand. His image appears on T-shirts and coffee mugs. Tour operators in Medellín offer narco tourism packages that visit his former properties. His family has written memoirs. His hitmen have become celebrities. All of this is grotesque considering the body count, but it is also revealing. It shows how easily we turn monsters into myths when enough time passes and when the story is told entertainingly. What is lost in this mythologization is the reality of what Escobar did and what he represented. He was not a revolutionary fighting an unjust system. He was a criminal who wanted wealth and power and was willing to kill anyone who stood in his way. He was not a Robin Hood. Robin Hood stole from the rich to give to the poor. Escobar enriched himself and occasionally distributed a fraction of his wealth to build public support. The houses he built in Medellín cost him perhaps $10 million. His fortune at its peak was worth billions. The charity was not generosity. It was investment in political capital, and that investment paid off. When the Search Bloc was closing in, it was the residents of the comunas who hid him and warned him of police movements. The very people he claimed to champion became human shields in his war against the state. The children of those neighborhoods became his sicarios, recruited as teenagers to kill for a few $100s per hit. When those boys were captured or killed, Escobar replaced them. The supply was endless. Poverty creates disposable soldiers. Escobar understood this and exploited it ruthlessly. The journalists who exposed him paid with their lives. Guillermo Cano, the editor of El Espectador, was assassinated in 1986 after his newspaper published investigative reports on the Medellín Cartel. Dozens of other journalists were killed throughout the 1980s and early 90s. The message was explicit: write about us and die. This created a culture of silence. Papers stopped covering the drug trade. Broadcasters avoided the topic. The public was left uninformed about the extent of narco-influence in Colombian politics and society. This silence enabled the cartels to operate more freely and to corrupt institutions more deeply. The damage to Colombian democracy was profound. Even now, decades later, journalism in Colombia is constrained by the memory of what happened to those who told the truth. The judges who tried to uphold the law were killed in even greater numbers. The Supreme Court lost 11 justices in the Palace of Justice siege. Lower court judges were assassinated individually. Some were killed in their homes in front of their families. The judiciary essentially collapsed. Judges resigned or accepted bribes or ruled in favor of the cartels out of fear. The rule of law ceased to function in any meaningful way. When laws cannot be enforced, the state loses legitimacy. When the state loses legitimacy, violence becomes the arbiter of disputes. This was the Colombia that Escobar created, a country where power came from the barrel of a gun and where the state existed at the sufferance of criminal organizations. The police and military suffered casualties that are difficult to comprehend. Approximately 700 police officers were killed in the hunt for Pablo Escobar. Many more were wounded or maimed. The Search Bloc alone lost hundreds of men. These were not abstract casualties. These were individuals with families, people who put on uniforms and went to work, knowing they might not come home. The impact on their families was devastating. Widows and orphans filled the barrios. The psychological toll on survivors was immense. Many officers developed post-traumatic stress. Some turned to alcohol or drugs. Some left the force. The institutional memory of that period has shaped Colombian law enforcement ever since. There is a hardness, a willingness to use overwhelming force that comes from having fought a war in which the other side used terror as policy. The civilian casualties are the hardest to quantify, but arguably the most significant. The Avianca bombing killed 107 people. The DAS building bombing killed 52. The Monaco building bombing in 1988, targeting a property owned by the Ochoa family, killed 2. Hundreds of others were killed in smaller attacks, car bombs, shootings, grenade attacks on police stations that killed bystanders. The exact number is unknown. Estimates range from 3,000 to 7,000 total deaths attributable to the Medellín Cartel's campaign of violence. Each of those numbers represents a person, a father who did not come home, a mother killed in an explosion, a child orphaned. The scale of suffering Escobar inflicted cannot be reduced to statistics, but the statistics are instructive. This was not a man fighting a corrupt system. This was a man terrorizing an entire nation to protect his profits. There is a question that haunts Escobar's story, a question that seems to have no satisfying answer. Why did he refuse to leave? By 1992, he had options. He could have fled Colombia and lived in luxury anywhere in the world. He had the resources to disappear completely, to establish himself in a country with no extradition treaty, to enjoy his wealth in safety. Instead, he chose to stay in Medellín, hunted by thousands, moving between safe houses, calling his family from public phones, knowing that every day might be his last. Why? The answer seems to be that he could not conceive of a life outside Colombia, outside Medellín specifically. His identity was tied to that place. His power was rooted there. His sense of self depended on being Don Pablo, the man from the comunas who became richer than anyone. To leave would be to admit defeat. It would be to accept that the government and his enemies had won. It would be to become just another rich man living in exile, disconnected from the context that gave his life meaning. This psychological rigidity cost him everything. A more pragmatic person would have fled and lived. Escobar stayed and died. The same pride that drove him to challenge the Colombian state, the same refusal to accept limits or acknowledge authority, ultimately trapped him. He could not bend, so he broke. The question of his wealth remains unresolved. Estimates vary wildly. Forbes in 1989 listed him as the 7th richest person in the world with a net worth of $3 billion. Other estimates have ranged as high as $30 billion. The truth is probably unknowable. Much of his wealth was in cash, buried or hidden in walls. Much was held by frontmen and shell corporations. After his death, some was seized by the government, some was taken by former associates. His family claims that most of it was lost, destroyed by moisture or eaten by rats, or simply abandoned when it became too dangerous to retrieve. There are still rumors of hidden stashes. People occasionally discover bundles of cash in rural properties that once belonged to Escobar. But the bulk of the fortune is gone, dispersed, rotted, or seized. What remains is the idea of the wealth, the mythology of Pablo Escobar as the richest criminal in history. Whether he actually was the richest is debatable. What is certain is that he controlled a distribution network that generated billions of dollars in annual revenue. What is certain is that he lived like a king. What is certain is that all the money in the world could not buy him what he wanted most, which was legitimacy and peace. The Escobar family's fate after his death was difficult. Maria Victoria and the children fled Colombia. They tried to find asylum in several countries. Most refused them. They eventually settled in Argentina under assumed names. Juan Pablo changed his name to Sebastián Marroquín. He has spent much of his adult life trying to come to terms with his father's legacy. He has written a book. He has given interviews. He has met with victims of his father's violence and apologized. He describes a childhood of luxury and love, followed by years of exile and shame. He says his father was two people, the man who played with him and the man who ordered atrocities. He does not excuse the atrocities, but he struggles to reconcile them with the father he knew. Sebastian's journey toward understanding is ongoing. In interviews, he speaks carefully, aware that every word will be scrutinized. He describes growing up at Hacienda Nápoles, playing with exotic animals, having anything he wanted. He describes a father who was attentive and affectionate, who played soccer with him, who helped with homework. That father seemed normal, even loving. Then there was the other father, the one he glimpsed occasionally, the one who made phone calls in clipped tones, the one surrounded by armed men, the one whose name made people afraid. For years, Sebastian did not reconcile these two figures. They existed separately in his mind. Only as an adult after his father's death, after years of therapy and reflection, has he begun to understand that they were the same person, that his father contained both capacities, love and violence, and that one does not excuse the other. Manuela, the daughter, has remained more private. She suffered psychological trauma from the violence and upheaval of her childhood. She has largely stayed out of public view. Maria Victoria has also remained mostly silent. She was 15 when she married Escobar and 43 when he died. She lived almost 3 decades defined entirely by her relationship to him. What she thinks about it all, whether she regrets marrying him, whether she understands the full scope of what he did, remains largely unknown. The family continues to receive threats. Some people blame them for Escobar's crimes. Others want access to money they believe is hidden. the Escobar name remains a burden. Roberto Escobar, Pablo's older brother, had a different trajectory. He was the cartel's accountant. He was arrested in 1991 and spent more than a decade in prison. After his release, he wrote a book and gave interviews. His accounts are self-serving and often contradict other sources, but they provide insight into the operation's financial mechanics. He claims that at the height of the business they were spending approximately $2,500 per week on rubber bands to bundle cash. He claims they lost tens of millions to moisture and rodents. He describes warehouses stacked floor to ceiling with US currency waiting to be laundered. His book reads like a technical manual for running a billion-dollar criminal enterprise, which in a sense it is. What is notable about Roberto's account is the banality of the details: paying off customs agents, bribing judges, maintaining pay lists for sicarios. The mechanics of the operation were fundamentally bureaucratic. Violence was employed strategically when needed, but most of the work was logistics and accounting. This is one of the important truths about Escobar's empire. It was not chaos, it was organization. It was ruthlessly efficient. It succeeded not because Escobar was particularly violent, though he was, but because he understood how to build systems. The system he built outlasted him. The methods he pioneered, bribing officials, using violence selectively, vertically integrating production and distribution, are still used by trafficking organizations today. The phrase plata o plomo, silver or lead, bribery or death, has become standard practice. The tactic of targeting family members to coerce cooperation was not invented by Escobar, but he perfected it. The use of young sicarios from poor neighborhoods continues. The fundamental insight that undergirded his empire, that massive profits enable almost infinite corruption and violence, remains valid. This is perhaps his most enduring legacy. He demonstrated that a criminal organization, if it controls enough money, can challenge a nation-state. He demonstrated that democratic institutions, if they are weak or corrupt, can be subverted or destroyed. He demonstrated that the war on drugs as conceived and executed does not work. Every metric suggests that the war on drugs has failed. Cocaine is cheaper and more available now than it was in the 1980s. Incarceration rates have exploded without significantly reducing supply. Tens of billions of dollars have been spent on interdiction and enforcement with minimal lasting impact. Meanwhile, the human costs have been enormous. Mass incarceration, militarized policing, and the empowerment of criminal organizations like Escobar's have all been consequences of prohibition-based policy. Escobar did not create these problems, but his career illustrated them. He showed what happens when there is massive demand for an illegal product and enormous profits to be made supplying it. Someone will always step in to fill that role. Killing one person, even someone as powerful as Escobar, does not change the underlying economics. The Colombia that exists today is, in many ways, still dealing with the aftermath of the Escobar era. The country has made progress. Violence levels have declined significantly. The government has regained control over much of the territory that was once dominated by cartels and guerrillas. Medellín has been transformed from one of the most dangerous cities in the world into a center of innovation and urban renewal. But the scars remain. Corruption is still endemic. Organized crime, though less visible, still operates. The cocaine trade continues, now dominated by smaller, more dispersed organizations rather than the massive cartels of the past. FARC, the guerrilla group that fought a 50-year insurgency, partially funded by drug money, signed a peace deal in 2016, but dissident factions continue trafficking. Paramilitary groups that originally formed to fight the cartels and guerrillas have themselves become criminal enterprises. The line between political violence and criminal violence is often indistinguishable. This is the Colombia that Escobar helped create, not single-handedly, certainly. The problems predate him and extend beyond him, but his era represented a nadir, a period when criminal power reached a level that genuinely threatened the state's existence. The fact that Colombia survived that period is a testament to the resilience of its institutions and people. The fact that the problems persist is a reminder that Escobar was a symptom as much as a cause. The broader lesson of Escobar's life is about power and its limits. He accumulated more wealth than almost anyone in history. He commanded an army of loyal followers. He corrupted every institution he touched. He killed thousands. He terrified a nation, and none of it bought him what he actually wanted. He wanted respect. He wanted to be seen as legitimate. He wanted his family to live without shame. He achieved none of those things. Instead, he died on a rooftop, hunted, alone except for one bodyguard, killed like a dog in the street. His family went into exile. His name became synonymous with monstrosity. The houses he built in the comunas still stand, but they are monuments to his vanity, not his generosity. The people he claimed to champion were used as expendable soldiers in his war. The money he made is mostly gone, rotted or seized or stolen. What remains is the body count and the lesson. The lesson is that crime, even enormously successful crime, does not lead anywhere good. It does not build anything lasting. It does not create meaning. It consumes everything around it and ultimately consumes itself. Escobar spent his entire life accumulating power, and in the end, that power could not save him from the consequences of how he accumulated it. There is a final irony in Escobar's story. The thing he feared most, extradition to the United States, probably would have saved his life. If he had been extradited in the mid-1980s, he would have spent decades in an American prison. It would have been a form of death, certainly, a death of freedom and power, but it would have been life. Instead, he chose to fight. He chose to wage war on the Colombian government rather than accept imprisonment. He chose pride over survival, and that choice killed him. One can argue about whether this was brave or foolish. What is indisputable is that it was consistent with everything else about him. He did not compromise. He did not accept limits. He believed, until the very end, that he could win, that his wealth and power would protect him, that he was smarter and tougher than everyone hunting him. He was wrong. The final image of Pablo Escobar is that photograph taken on the roof. His body sprawled across the tiles, blood pooled beneath him, his eyes open, staring at nothing, the most powerful criminal in history reduced to a corpse displayed for cameras. There is no dignity in that death. There is no redemption. There is only the end of a man who chose violence and paid the price that violence eventually exacts from everyone who embraces it. The question remains, what does this life mean? What does the story of Pablo Escobar demonstrate about human nature, about power, about the societies we build? One interpretation is that it demonstrates the emptiness of criminal ambition. Escobar accumulated everything and achieved nothing. His empire collapsed. His family was exiled. His name became a curse. From this perspective, his life is a morality tale about the inevitable failure of evil. But that interpretation is too simple. It suggests that the system worked, that justice prevailed, that good triumphed over evil. The reality is more complicated. The system did eventually kill Escobar, but only after he had terrorized the country for years, only after thousands had died, only after institutions had been corrupted and weakened. And the system that killed him did not solve the underlying problems. The drug trade continues, corruption continues, violence continues at levels lower than during Escobar's peak, but still staggering by international standards. The triumph over Escobar was tactical, not strategic. His death ended one organization, but did not end the industry or the conditions that enabled his rise. A different interpretation is that Escobar's life demonstrates the failure of prohibition. If cocaine were legal and regulated, there would be no 20,000% profit margin to fight over. There would be no billion-dollar criminal enterprises. There would still be addiction and social costs, certainly, but those costs exist now, along with all the violence and corruption that prohibition creates. From this perspective, Escobar is less a monster than a predictable result of policy failure. Make something that people want illegal, create enormous profit incentives for supplying it, and someone like Escobar will emerge. This interpretation has merit, but it also risks diminishing Escobar's agency. He chose his path, he chose violence, he chose to kill judges and journalists and children on an airplane. Those were not inevitable results of prohibition. Those were choices made by a specific person with specific psychology. A third interpretation focuses on inequality and state weakness. Escobar emerged in a context of extreme poverty, limited economic mobility, and a state that could not provide basic services to much of its population. He offered an alternative. He offered wealth and power to people who had neither. He offered protection in communities where the state was absent. He built houses where the government built nothing. The fact that he was a murderer does not change the fact that he met needs the state failed to meet. From this perspective, Escobar is a symptom of state failure, and the solution is not more policing but more effective governance, more equitable distribution of resources, more opportunities for people in places like the comunas of Medellín. This interpretation also has merit, but it also risks romanticizing Escobar. He was not a revolutionary. He did not care about inequality except as something to exploit for his own benefit. The truth is probably that all three interpretations are partially correct, and none is complete. Escobar was a criminal driven by ambition and greed. He was also a product of prohibition's perverse incentives. He was also enabled by state weakness and inequality. All of these factors were necessary. None was sufficient alone. What made Pablo Escobar possible was a specific confluence of circumstances: Colombian institutional weakness, American drug demand, prohibition-based policy, extreme inequality, and an individual willing to use violence without limit. Remove any one of those factors, and his story might have been different. But they all existed, and so he became what he became. The lesson, if there is one, is not simple. It is not that crime does not pay, though it ultimately did not pay Escobar. It is not that the war on drugs works, though Escobar was eventually killed. It is not that inequality causes criminality, though it certainly enables it. The lesson is more nuanced. It is that institutions matter, that policy has consequences, that the decisions societies make about how to address social problems, poverty, addiction, inequality, have real effects, and that when institutions fail, when policy is misguided, when inequality is extreme, people like Pablo Escobar will emerge to exploit the gaps. They will offer simple solutions to complex problems. They will use violence to achieve power. They will corrupt everything they touch. And stopping them, once they emerge, will require enormous sacrifice. The story of Pablo Escobar is not about one man, though it is told through one man's life. It is about the society that produced him and the societies he affected. It is about Colombia in the late 20th century, a country trying to build democracy in the context of extreme violence and inequality. It is about the United States and its appetite for cocaine, and its response to that appetite. It is about the drug trade and the billions of dollars it generates and the ways that money warps institutions and corrupts individuals. It is about power and its pursuit and its costs. It is about ambition unchecked by morality. It is about the children recruited as sicarios and the judges murdered for doing their jobs, and the passengers on Avianca Flight 203 who died for no reason. It is about all of those things, and in the end, it is a tragedy. Not Escobar's tragedy. His death was deserved. The tragedy is everyone else's. The tragedy is that so many people died because one man wanted wealth and power and was willing to do anything to get them. The tragedy is that the conditions that enabled his rise still exist in many places. The tragedy is that we haven't learned the lessons his life offers. We still pursue prohibition-based policies that create black markets and empower criminals. We still tolerate inequality that makes crime an attractive option for the desperate. We still fail to build institutions strong enough to resist corruption, and so people like Pablo Escobar continue to emerge in different places under different circumstances, but always following the same basic script. Identify a profitable illegal market, use violence to dominate it, corrupt the authorities, and rule until the state finally musters the resources to destroy them. It is a pattern that has repeated throughout history and will continue to repeat until we address the underlying causes. Pablo Escobar died on December 2nd, 1993. He was 44 years old. He had lived a life of extraordinary violence and accumulated extraordinary wealth. None of it saved him. He died on a rooftop in Medellín, shot by police, his body displayed for the cameras. The war was over, but the problems that enabled his rise remain. The demand for cocaine remains. The profit margins remain. The inequality remains. The state weakness, though improved, remains. And so the threat of another Pablo Escobar remains, not in the same form perhaps. The massive cartels of the 80s and 90s have been largely replaced by smaller, more agile organizations, but the fundamental dynamics are unchanged. As long as there is massive demand for illegal products and enormous profits to be made supplying them, someone will step forward to fill that role. As long as there are young people with no opportunities and nothing to lose, someone will recruit them as soldiers. As long as institutions are weak and officials are corruptible, criminal organizations will flourish. This is the real legacy of Pablo Escobar, not the specific organization he built, which is gone, not the specific methods he used, though they are still employed, but the demonstration of what is possible when crime is organized at scale, when violence is employed strategically, when enough money is at stake. He showed that a criminal can challenge a state. He showed that terrorism can be effective. He showed that institutions can be corrupted. And having shown those things, he made them easier for others to replicate. The roof where he died is gone now, demolished years ago. The house has been replaced. Los Olivos is a middle-class neighborhood where people go about their lives. Hacienda Nápoles, his massive estate, is a theme park. The hippos he imported have bred and spread into the Colombian countryside, where they have become an ecological problem. His family lives in Argentina under assumed names. The Medellín Cartel is a historical entity. The billions of dollars he made are mostly gone. What remains are the photographs, the body on the roof, the mugshots from his arrests, the images of the DAS building blown apart, the wreckage of Avianca Flight 203. These are the monuments to Pablo Escobar, not the houses he built or the soccer fields. The monuments are the bomb sites. The monuments are the graves. The monuments are the children who grew up without fathers because Escobar ordered their deaths. The monuments are the institutions he weakened and the trust he destroyed and the fear he instilled in an entire nation. That is what remains. That is the legacy. He wanted to be remembered as a champion of the poor. He is remembered as one of history's great criminals. He wanted legitimacy. He achieved notoriety. He wanted power. He got death. There is a kind of justice in that, though it came too late for his victims. There is a kind of meaning in the gap between what he wanted and what he got, though that meaning is cold comfort to the thousands who died at his order. We return to the roof one final time. The man lying on the tiles is not the richest criminal who ever lived, though he may have been. He is not a hero, though some still see him that way. He is not a victim of an unjust system, though he exploited the system's injustices. He is a man who made choices. He chose crime over legitimate work. He chose violence over peace. He chose pride over survival. And in the end, those choices brought him to this place, December 2nd, 1993, Los Olivos neighborhood, Medellín, 44 years old, shot dead by police, his eyes open, staring at nothing. The life of Pablo Escobar teaches many lessons, but perhaps the simplest is this, that wealth without limit and power without accountability do not lead to happiness or meaning. They lead to isolation and paranoia and ultimately to death. He had everything money could buy. It bought him nothing that mattered. He died alone on a roof, hunted like an animal, his empire in ruins, his family in exile, his name a synonym for monstrosity. That is the truth that the photographs capture, and that no mythology can erase. That is what remains when you strip away the legend. A man who thought he could buy his way out of consequences discovered that some debts can only be paid in blood, and in the end he paid in full.